Well, folks, it's official. Stanford, Cal, and SMU will be doing their best LeBron James impression and taking their talents to South Beach. Well, it's not just South Beach, also Raleigh, Charlottesville, Blacksburg, Syracuse, Tallahassee. You get the point. They are joining the ACC, folks. We're going to talk about what it means for the ACC. What does it mean for Florida State, Clemson, and their desire to get out of the ACC? What does it mean for the Pac-4? Can they get the Pac-12 back together? And what does it mean for the conference my team, the West Virginia Mountaineers, are in? What does it mean for the Big 12? We're going to talk about all of that right after this word from our sponsor. Ladies and gentlemen, this episode is brought to you by Dutch Miller Automotive, where friends and family pricing means you get the best deal right up front on any new or pre-loved vehicle in stock every time. With brands like Chevrolet, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Kia, Hyundai, Ford, GMC, Buick, and Subaru, the Dutch Miller Automotive family is always growing and ready to put you in the car or truck you've been searching for. Check out our inventory across West Virginia at DutchMillerAuto.com or come in today to the home of friends and family pricing, only at a Dutch Miller Automotive store near you. What is up, college sports fans, Big 12 fans, fellow members of Mountaineer Nation? Welcome into another edition of Couz's Corner. Belly yourself up to the bar and let me serve you up another shot of top-shelf college football content. On tap in this episode, we are going to talk about the ramifications of this move of Stanford, Cal, and SMU joining the ACC. This has been reported by several media outlets, and I'm not going to read an article to you in this episode. I'm just going to kind of go over the bullet points and the highlights of this and what it means for the various conferences. All three of these schools are taking major discounts to join the league. SMU is going to be coming in and not taking any TV revenue at all for the first 9 years. Think about that, folks. 9 years. I think I read on Twitter somewhere that it's going to be like $250 million they're going to be giving up just so they can get in a Power 5 conference, because I think SMU realizes this is their last chance. This could be their last chance to become a Power 5 institution, and they have so much. Their donors are really well off. They have a lot of donor money that they can use to offset this cost. Also, Stanford and Cal are going to be taking major pay cuts. I think they're only going to be taking about 30% of the Tier 1 revenue. I did a live stream earlier in the week with Immaculate. You can go check it out. The thumbnail on it says defensive move. I'll leave a link to it in the comments. But Ross Dellinger put out a report that said adding these three schools will add additional revenue to the ACC of the tune of somewhere between 50 and 60 million, I think was the number. But by the time you pull everything out and by the time the dust settles, the current ACC members will only be netting about a $2 million profit ballpark, if that. Each school is going to be making no more than $2 million, somewhere in that ballpark. Now, that does not include, and that's from just the TV money, that does not include college football playoff money, and it does not include NCAA tournament money and other revenue the ACC might be able to bring in. That is strictly from the TV money. So it makes you wonder, why in the world would they want to bring these three schools in, increase their travel costs, when they're not going to be making enough money to even come close to closing that gap with the Big Ten and the SEC? Well, like I said in my live stream, it's a defensive move. The way the bylaws are written and the way the TV contract is written with ESPN and the ACC, if the ACC drops below 15 members, ESPN can pay them less money. And with Florida State, Clemson, and UNC and other schools potentially wanting out of this conference, I think the ACC sees the writing on the wall. They know these schools are going to be leaving. So in order to backfill and do it in advance to protect themselves, if these schools leave, they want to go ahead and add these three schools. So that'll put them up to 18 members. That includes Notre Dame, obviously. So 17 of the 18 play football in the conference. And if they lose 3, they're still at 15. So they don't lose any money from ESPN. I think that's the basic reason they did this move and why they see it as a benefit. And by doing it now and getting Stanford and Cal, it gives them 2 Power 5 schools, which likely won't be available in a couple of years, because Stanford and Cal would likely go or try to find a home in another power conference, whether it be the Big 10, a long shot could be the Big 12, or do they get into the Mountain West or AAC and get locked into a grant of rights that lasts too long that they're not able to get out of. So whatever the case may be, the ACC saw an opportunity to strike and add 2 Power 5 schools plus SMU, who's coming in basically for free, and that gets them in a brand new market in Dallas-Fort Worth. So they're getting in two of the largest markets in the country, in San Francisco and in Dallas. So that combined with the fact that they're trying to offset potential future moves by other conference members. Now, I think this means the ACC is safer now, but still unstable long term. And what do I mean by that? Even if three schools like Florida State, Clemson, and UNC leave, they will remain a viable Power 5 conference. Now, like I said, they're not going to make the money the Big Ten and SEC are making, but they'll be making as much, if not more, than the Big 12. And obviously, we know the Pac-12 is no longer in existence. So they will still be an A5 or what some call a P5 conference. It also keeps Notre Dame happy in the short term. Notre Dame was really pushing hard to get Stanford and Cal into the ACC. They were, according to reports, they were leading the charge to get that done. This keeps them happy, and maybe by keeping them happy, you make them less likely to jump to the Big Ten. No, Notre Dame's probably not going to join your league in football now, but you can still keep that scheduling agreement with them in football, keep them as a member in all other sports, and hopefully keep them away from joining the Big Ten. Now, I say unstable long-term because if Florida State, Clemson, and UNC do leave, you lose your most valuable brands, and the league may be less valuable when it's time to renegotiate that TV deal around 2034, 2035, which the TV deal, by the way, expires in 2036, but they normally go to the negotiating table a year or two early. And this move will not, let me repeat that, this move will not, in my opinion, prevent those schools from leaving, and it may actually create a higher level of dissent since those three schools, according to reports, did not want this move. We had heard a couple weeks ago that there were four schools voting against this move. It was North Carolina State, North Carolina, Florida State, Clemson. All four of those schools were reported back in the spring to be a member of what they called the Magnificent Seven, schools that had at least explored ways to get out of the grant of rights. So it was, thought that all four of those schools would remain in lockstep with one another because they didn't want to see this happen, because they didn't want it to get any harder for them to get out of this league. Well, the ACC needed 12 of 15 teams to vote for this move, so one of those schools flipped. And according to Nicole Auerbach, it was North Carolina State that flipped. Now, that leads to another area of dissent, and that is between North Carolina State and North Carolina. Last night, I'm recording this video on Friday, September the 1st. Late last night, the North Carolina Board of Regents or Board of Trustees, whatever they call themselves, sent out a letter basically saying they were against this move. So if North Carolina was against it and North Carolina State flipped, will that now cause dissent between those two institutions? And does it mean that those two are maybe not necessarily tied at the hip like we all thought? And also, maybe North Carolina State realizes even if the ACC implodes or teams start leaving, maybe NC State didn't think they had anywhere else to go. There's been talk that maybe teams like NC State or Virginia Tech or Pitt or some of these Louisville, some of these other schools may could join the Big 12 if the ACC implodes, and which I'll get to the Big 12 in a minute. Maybe NC State doesn't either want to do that or they don't see that as a viable option, so they decided to go ahead and change their mind. Hey, let's make a couple extra $1 million a year, strengthen ourselves, try to strengthen ourselves, quote unquote, with more numbers, and keep ourselves a viable A5 conference. Maybe that was NC State's thinking. Who knows? We may not ever know the true reason they flipped. Now, what does it mean for the Pac-4, what used to be the Pac-12? It will make it even harder for this conference to rebuild. We all heard that the four schools were looking at potentially rebuilding this conference, maybe getting some teams from the Mountain West, maybe getting some teams from the American, and keeping the Pac-4 conference or the Pac-12 conference rather alive, keeping the autonomy status, and just adding several group of 5 teams to the mix. This is going to make it much harder to do that because Stanford was the linchpin in this whole thing. Based on what we've read in the media, they were the bigger brand of the four. The other two being obviously Oregon State, Washington State. That's the biggest market that was remaining of the four schools, the San Francisco market. And Stanford was your bigger brand. You've lost those two things now. All that leaves you is Oregon State and Washington State, two lesser brands in smaller markets. And it means that those two schools will likely form some type of merger with the Mountain West Conference. Now, there were reports that they were talking with both the Mountain West and the AAC. Those reports were, out, I don't know, a week or two ago. Well, based on reports today by Brett McMurphy, a tweet he put out, and Brett McMurphy is with Action Network, Mike Oresco and the AAC, which is the American, are no longer interested in adding teams in the West. So apparently, Oregon State, Washington State are no longer on the table for the American Conference, which leaves them only one option at this point, it looks like, and that would be the Mountain West. And the Mountain West seems to really want to add these two schools. So my gut feeling is that's likely what happens here. These two schools will end up basically stepping down a level, going to the Group of 5 level, joining the Mountain West Conference. It'd be a great move for the Mountain West. Keeps that conference stable, keeps it strong, puts it, in my opinion, could potentially make it the strongest Group of 5 conference if it's not already. But nonetheless, it strengthens their position. And let's face it, and even though Oregon State, Washington State would not be Power 5 anymore, would not be Autonomy 5, they would lose money on a TV deal. It would give them a little bit easier path to the college football playoff, because let's remember, right now, the way it sits, the college football playoff has 6, is giving us automatic berths to the college football playoff once it expands to the top 6 conference champions. Now, that will likely change to the top 5 conference champions, but nonetheless, it gives Oregon State and Washington State likely an easier path to the playoff than they have now in the Pac-12. So this may turn out to be a good move for Washington State. I know it doesn't feel like it now, but long term, it actually could be a positive move for those two schools. And another option, does the Big 12 throw these two schools a lifeline and get to 18 members, which brings me to that conference. What does this mean for the Big 12? Well, if they do decide to throw a lifeline to Washington State and Oregon State, those two Pacific Northwest schools, it would get the Big 12 to 18 members, like I said. Now, Fox likely wouldn't give any more money for these additions. Fox is not contractually obligated to pay pro rata for any Power 5 additions. They did agree to pay some money for the Four Corner schools, but I doubt they're going to give any more, and they're not obligated to. However, ESPN is contractually obligated to pay pro rata for any Power 5 additions to the Big 12. And with ESPN owning 2/3 of the Big 12 media rights, that means Oregon State and Washington State could earn up to about $20 million per year. That's less than they're making now in the Pac, but more than they would make in the Mountain West, more than likely. So the Big 12 would be a good option for Oregon State and Washington State. However, that being said, there would have to be an appetite from the Big 12 to add them. And personally, I don't see that happening. Yes, it does get you 2 more schools in that 4th time zone, which Brett Yormark has talked about ad nauseum wanting to be in. He got that a little bit when he added the Arizona schools, because Arizona is in the Pacific time zone for a part of the year, and it includes football season. So they are in the Pacific time zone, at least part of the time. This would get you into the Pacific time zone year-round. So it would do that for you. It would get you into new markets in Oregon and Washington. Yeah, maybe smaller markets. Could get you a little piece of the Seattle market, but primarily it would be smaller markets. But on the downside, it would create a lot more problems and expense for the existing Big 12 members as far as travel goes, especially when you talk about West Virginia, when you talk about Central Florida, when you talk about Cincinnati, even when you talk about Houston and the Texas schools. Creates a lot more travel expense for those schools. And I don't think it's going to bring them any more revenue. Yes, they would pay pro rata, ESPN would, but it's not going to bring any additional money into your conference than what you already have. So it'd be revenue neutral from that regard, but yet it would increase your travel costs. So I don't really see how it works, or I don't really see how it benefits the Big 12, in my opinion, to add these schools, unless they just want to do it out of the kindness of their heart. And we all know that in today's college athletics, that typically doesn't happen. Also, Big 12 sources have made statements in the past couple of weeks that they have no intentions of expanding further right now. And I believe that. And I know what people are going to say, but Couz, these conferences and these schools have been saying they've been saying the opposite of what they actually do for years now. I get that. But the Big 12, since Brett Yormark has come in the door, has not been doing that. They have been transparent about what their goals are. As a matter of fact, Brett Yormark even worded it. He said, I've telegraphed my move, because he talked a lot about wanting to get into the 4th time zone, get teams from the West. Talked about wanting to get to stay at least 14, even after Oklahoma and Texas leave. And he did that. He actually got to 16, got in the 4th time zone. He did exactly what he said he wanted to do. He was very transparent about that. So if the Big 12 is now coming out and saying we have no intentions of expanding now, there's not really any media money left, then why should we not believe them? I believe them. I don't think they have any intention of expanding, at least not in the near future. Another way this can impact the Big 12 is it could squash all the talk about the Big 12 picking off any ACC leftovers, at least in the near future. With the ACC adding 3 new schools, it will make it even harder for the conference to dissolve. We all know the dissolution was one of the ways some people talked about the conference potentially breaking up. You need at least 8 schools to vote to leave the conference at the same time, which would, in a sense, dissolve the conference, making the grant of rights null and void. Well, now that you have 18 teams in the league, you would have to have 10 schools vote to leave at the same time to dissolve the conference. And I don't see that happening, folks. I don't see 10 schools having a home if this conference breaks up. That's a lot of schools. So it'll be really harder for the ACC to break apart now that they've added even if Florida State, Miami, or UNC or Clemson leave, it's still going to be hard to dissolve this conference, and even harder now. So this means that West Virginia, Cincinnati, UCF will likely not get any additional Eastern teams unless they add group of 5 teams or UConn. And I just don't see that happening, at least not in the near term. Now, when the Big 12 media deal is getting closer to expiration, like when you get to around 2029 or 2030 and they start renegotiating that media deal, Brett Yormark may want to go out and try to add some strong basketball schools, because we've heard him say he would like to separate the basketball media deal from the football media deal because he thinks basketball is undervalued. And he wants to strengthen the league's basketball brand. But you don't have to do that right now. You can wait a few years and see how all this stuff shakes out. Then maybe go grab UConn. Maybe go grab a Gonzaga. Go grab a Villanova, St. John's, whoever. But I don't see that happening anytime in the near future. So, WVU, UCF, and Cincinnati fans, I wouldn't expect to see any more teams from the Eastern United States join this conference, the Big 12, anytime soon. So let's just deal with the fact our teams have to travel a lot. West Virginia's been doing it now for 12 years. We've gotten used to it. We've grown to love this conference, and I know UCF and Cincinnati will as well. Let's sit back and enjoy the new teams coming into the Big 12. We've got the 4 coming in this year with UCF, Cincinnati, BYU, and Houston. We have the 4 corner schools coming in next year. Let's enjoy this. Enjoy this new Big 12 conference. Enjoy the fact we are still in a power conference and have a spot in the college football playoff, at least as it sits today. And let's just enjoy the great competition this league brings. Let's enjoy the parity that we're going to see in this league going forward, not only in football, but also in basketball. And let's enjoy this conference because there's a lot of exciting times ahead and exciting future ahead, in my opinion, in the Big 12. So let's not worry about the travel right now. Let's just enjoy what we have. Embrace being in a power conference. Embrace being in a stable power conference. With that being said, guys, I want to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comment section. What do you think about this move of Stanford, Cal, SMU going to the ACC? What do you think it means for the ACC? What do you think it means for the Big 12? And do you think the Pac-12 has any hope? Do you think Washington State and Oregon State have any hope of keeping the Pac-12 brand alive and rebuilding it? I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Also, guys, if you want to support me here on the channel, there are 4 different ways you can do it free: by liking the video, which is the thumbs up button, sharing it with your family and friends, dropping that comment below, and subscribing to the channel. You can also support me financially here. If you want to help me grow this thing financially, there are several ways you can do that. You can join the channel, hit the join button right below, become a channel member. There are perks that go along with that. I've got the names of several of my channel members scrolling along the bottom. These are my club level members, also known as the Mountaineer Maniac level. It's level 2. So shout out to them. Also, the pub level members, which is the Country Roads level. That's the introductory level here at Couz's Corner. If you want to join that, take advantage of the perks it has to offer. And obviously, you'll get your name added to this list of members. Also, you can hit the heart with a $sign in it. That's a way you can make a one-time donation. I have links to PayPal, Cash App, and Venmo in the description box. You can do that as well. And last but not least, check out my merch store where I have shirts, hoodies, ball caps, coffee mugs, all kinds of different items to choose from in several different designs. That's another way you can support me here on the channel. With that being said, guys, I really appreciate you tuning into this episode. And until the next one, you Country Roads.
Take me home.